ever seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.
We're talking today with Mr. Gerald Redwine of Caledonia, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Mr. Redwine, can you begin with some background on yourself? To start with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, right over on Henry Street, southeast, in 1933.
Okay. And did you grow up in Grand Rapids?
I did. I attended Henry's elementary school, and then I went on to South High School.
Mm-hmm. And what did your family do for a living at that time?
Well, I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandfather at the time was working at McKay Tower downtown. Mm-hmm. He was a custodian.
Okay. And do you remember when World War II was going on, you're a kid and you're in school, did you pay much attention to all of that, or did you just worry about your own stuff?
No, we did a lot. We had the bond drive in our school, and I was one of the leaders in the bond drive at the time, and it was 1944. And we raised bonds. So, and I had about 4 uncles who were in service, and one cousin who was in the Marine Corps.
Okay. Now, the schools in Grand Rapids at that point were effectively integrated, weren't they? Or there were white kids and black kids, at least in the high school?
Yes, they were in grammar school also. I don't recall ever going to a segregated school. I mean,
yeah.
There might have been there, but I don't recall.
They kind of self-segregated in the late 60s when white people moved into Christian schools and things like that. But if you go back to the 40s, then no, there were not separate systems.
No, there were not separate systems. I don't recall at all. I had all white teachers though. I didn't have any black teachers.
All right. Now, so when did you graduate from high school?
I graduated from high school in 1952.
Okay.
But I was a midterm. I was in between terms. I came out in February of 1952.
All right. And then what did you do at that point?
Well, I went on to what they call junior college, and now it's called Grand Rapids Community College. And I was there from January through March before I went into the Marine Corps.
Okay. Now, what motivated you to join the Marines?
Really, I was going to school, and 4 of my buddies who were not going to school got their draft notice. And I was a different qualification than they were. So they came down to school one day and they met me in the cafeteria and said, hey, we're going to go and join the service because we got our draft notice, so we all want to go in together, and how about coming with us? So we all went in together, and at the end it was 6 of us going in together, and we went to the recruiting office to go into the Air Force. Air Force recruiter said he couldn't take all of us. Now, we didn't understand what he was saying, but eventually we found out he said he couldn't take 6 black people at that time. That's what he's really saying. He said, we can take 2 of you. And we said, no, we all want to go in together. Well, I can't take all of you. So he said, well, we'll go over and join the Navy. So we went over to the Navy recruiter, and he said, I can't take all of you. He said, but I can take 2 of you as stewards. We said, we don't want to be stewards. And he said, well, that guy over there, he can probably take all of you. And it was a Marine. And we went over and talked to him. He said, yeah, I can take all of you. And we said, okay, but we didn't want to go to South Carolina. We wanted to go to California.
Right.
The Marine base out there at San Diego. He said he could arrange that. So we all joined, and we all went to San Diego.
Okay. Now, what did you know about South Carolina at that point? What motivated you to say that?
Because we knew that there was a base there called Moffett Point Marine Base, and that's where they trained black Marines. They didn't integrate. They were segregated, and we didn't want to go there. And we knew San Diego was not segregated.
Right, because you're at a point where, I mean, Truman has started to desegregate the military back in '47, or at least that's when the first executive order came out. But overall, the armed forces are still in a kind of a transition phase here in the early '50s. Korean War puts more pressure on there to get more guys in. But so you're in a situation where some of it's segregated and some of it isn't.
True.
So the Navy, they only want you as stewards, for instance. That's the way they did it in World War II.
Right.
Yeah, okay. But they set it up so you get to go out to San Diego instead.
Right.
All right.
Right.
So when did you get out to San Diego?
We, you know, well, that was our first experience with segregation, really, most of us, because we caught a troop train from Detroit and went to San Diego, but we had a stopover in Kansas City. So we all got off the train because it was going to be a 4-hour stop. So we all got off the train and walked into town and went to a theater. By this time, we had picked up 2 white guys from Grand Rapids. So we said, well, let's kill some time in this movie theater. So they went and got their tickets, and one guy got his ticket. Then one of us stepped up. I don't know which one it was, but one of us stepped up, and the lady said, I can't sell you a ticket. And we asked, well, why not, you know? She said, well, I just can't sell you a ticket. So then she called the manager, and the manager came out and told us, we can't go in that theater. So our 2 buddies from Grand Rapids, the white friends, said, well, we're not going either. And they took their money back, and we all went straight back to the train and did get off the train for 3 hours. We sat there and just played cards and things until we got to San Diego. And then we got to San Diego, I think it was about the 30th of March.
All right. And what sort of reception do you get when you arrive in the Marine base?
Well, it was typical. Recruits step on this line, stand on these pair of shoes they had in the floor, and stand there, and drill instructor just went up and down the line, chewing you out, you know, and everything because you weren't looking straight or so forth. And other than that, we were just all Marines. And actually, we just, at boot camp, everybody's treated the same.
All right. Now, how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to military life?
Well, it was easy to me because I was in the Boy Scouts here in Grand Rapids. So I knew how to stand straight and tall, and I knew when to say yes, sir, or no, sir. And the majority of us did know it. Nobody got really in trouble for that. The drill instructors were really, really tough, and they really put the fear of God in you. So it was no problem.
All right. Were they consistent? I mean, you knew what you had to do, and if you're doing it, then they treat you one way, and that kind of,
you followed the orders
Yeah.
and did what they told you. Yes, it was. I have one incident I'll tell you about, is that we went to the swimming class, and 5 of us could swim, 1 of us couldn't. And we knew the guy that couldn't swim. So after we qualified, they put us over to the side, and we stood there talking. And me and another friend from Grand Rapids, we knew this guy couldn't swim, so we seen him go in the water. They pushed him in the water to make sure he couldn't swim. And then when he came up, we started laughing. And that was the wrong thing to do. Because up the tower, we went up the tower. They had a tower there, and he said, get up the tower. So we went up the tower. And Floyd, I forget his name. Anyway, we jumped off. So he said, I didn't tell you to jump off. Go back up the tower. And I think we went up that tower 6 times. And when we came out, we were beat red from hitting that water because it was 20 feet up in the air. So it was a lesson that we learned quick.
All right. What sort of physical training did you get in boot camp?
We had a lot of PT, physical training, and that was most of it, and rifle training, weapons training with other weapons. At that time, they called it jiu-jitsu. We had to go through judo. And we did a bayonet training in boot camp. And we did that at San Diego. And then we went up to a place they called Camp Matthews. It's no longer there, for 3 weeks of rifle training and other weapons.
Now, was that still part of the basic training chunk, or was that now advanced training?
That was At that time, it was just a combination. They
Okay.
didn't call it advance or anything. It was just all training.
Right.
And it was 10 weeks duration for the whole boot camp period. And after that, we came home in June of 53 for 10 days of liberty.
And then what happens after that?
Then we went back to Camp Pendleton, joined the 3rd Marine Division, and we were there from 52 till the latter part of 52, and we went over heading for Japan in 1953. I think it was January. We headed over to Japan.
Okay. Now,
We weren't going to Japan, we were going to Korea.
right. Okay. Now, had you expected pretty much all along that you would wind up in Korea?
Yes, one of us out of the 6 went directly to Korea, and he went with the air wing of the Marine Corps. But the other five of us went with the what they call the grunts, and we went from the 3rd Marine Division to on boats on a ship.
Okay.
We went on an APA, and it's very crowded. You got a whole battalion of Marines on one boat, and it was a World War II boat, which was at, I think it went about 20 knots at the most, if it got that fast.
Yep.
And we were on the ocean for 20 days.
All right. Now, did a lot of the guys get sick?
Oh, terrible, terribly sick. Yeah, everybody got sick. I think at the get-go, when you go out, I've noticed it myself. As soon as we got out of San Diego Harbor, everybody got sick, it seems like. But once we got onto the water, and we're going out there for 4 or 5 days, you were okay. And we even went through a typhoon, so it was
Okay.
It was okay. Yeah.
Now, I don't know, in the middle of a typhoon, did you start to wonder if you were going to survive to the other end? Or?
Oh yeah, well, everybody got scared, and like everything else, that's when you pray to God and everything else. But they put you in these holes, and they have a lockdown, which is watertight doors, and it's not fun in there because everybody's having their breakfast come up, and then some people don't go to breakfast because of that. And when we got to, we didn't know we were going to Japan. We thought we were going to Korea. And when we got near, I don't know when the order came, but they diverted us to Japan.
So when did you arrive in Japan?
I don't know the exact date, but it was in the winter. We got to Japan, and we were put in tents because they didn't expect us there.
Okay. Now, did you find out why it was that you were diverted from Korea over to Japan?
Yeah, we did. We found out that the armistice was coming, and they said that they were not going to send any more troops in country at that time. So I don't know. I'm assuming the captain of the ship got orders to go to Japan, and we ended up in Gifu, Japan.
Right.
And some of us ended up in Sasebo, Japan. Some of us ended up in northern Japan, called I don't know the name of the base up there.
Okay. So, and you were traveling as a unit. You were not just going in as replacements. You were with your specific battalion.
We were a whole battalion,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we were the 3rd Marine Division. So
Yeah.
there was units going from all going from San Diego on different ships. So there was in our convoy, I think there was 6 ships.
All right.
So.
Okay. And now you go into Gifu, and what was life there like?
It was a shocker at first, because at the camp we went to, it still had holes in the wall from guns that would fire at the base. It was a Japanese air base at one time, and we still had holes in the wall and everything. This is 1953, and we didn't expect that. And then we seen signs around the base saying, Americans go home and all that bit. So it's kind of scary. Then there are certain areas you couldn't go into. And they said, these are communist areas, you can't go in there. They had the May Day celebration that was pretty much big deal over in Japan, and we didn't like that. So there's a whole lot of things you had to get used to. And then the customs are different. And you don't wear shoes inside some places, and they had temples they didn't want you to go into, things like that. A lot of more restrictions than you had in the United States. Yeah.
But they were restrictions on all the Americans, not
On
just
everybody,
some of them.
yeah.
Yeah. So what did you spend your time doing while you were in Japan?
Most of the time, you know, if we weren't in training, most of the time we play cards and just stayed on the base. Went to movies, and things like that.
So they didn't really have anything in particular for you to do except just be there.
Kill time.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kill time.
All right. And how long did you wind up staying there?
I was at Gifu until I went to a unit called the Sub-Unit 1 Provisional Casual Center, where it was at Yokosuka, Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And I went up there, and they were part of the 1st Marine Division in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And we were the hospital unit, really. We interviewed the guys that came from the Korea that had to be medevaced and all that bit. We had to interview them and report back what was wrong with them and things like that.
Now, how did you wind up with that assignment?
I re-enlisted and wanted to stay in Japan. I was on my way back. Like I said, I went in 52, and this was almost 54, 55.
Right.
So I extended, and I didn't re-enlist at that time. I extended my tour to stay over there.
All right. Now, were they making much of an effort to encourage people to extend or re-enlist, or was it just an option that was out there?
No, every time you got close, they would ask you to re-enlist, and they were trying to keep people in. And it depended on your rank. I kind of accelerated a little bit when I went in there. I went from, I left there private, and I was a sergeant in a couple of years there. So I went right to Gifu, Japan. I was a sergeant. So.
All right. Now, why did you want to stay in? Or
Reason I stayed in is because I called back to Grand Rapids, talked to my dad, and I said, "What's the job situation in Grand Rapids?" He says, "Poor." He said, "If you want to work in a factory," he said, "fine." He says, but I said, "I don't want to work in a factory." So I said, "I'm going to stay in the Marine Corps. I like it here." So I re-enlisted the first time for 3 years. Well, by that time I had 6 years in the Marine Corps after that enlistment. I said, "I'm just going to stay, stay for the 20. And it's a funny thing that at that time, the top pay for retirement was $175 a month. And that looked pretty good at that time.
All right. So basically, you pretty much decide that you're going to go and have a career with the Marines. Now, what impressions did you have of the Japanese people themselves? I mean, you'd mentioned some of it. There was some anti-American sentiment there. But overall, what was it like for you?
Overall, the Japanese people treated me well. They taught me how to play a card game they have called Hanafuda, and I played that game with Japanese people, and I was fine with them. No problems at all.
All right. And now, you're there. Now, did they send you then back to the States?
Yes, I came back to El Toro Marine Base at, which is no longer there, in California, around Santa Ana, California. And I stayed there approximately 4 or 5 months. I didn't like it. So I told them I wanted to go back overseas, and they sent me to Okinawa.
What did they have you doing in El Toro?
El Toro, I worked with the MPs. My field was admin, but I worked with the MP base at El Toro. And me and a sergeant didn't get along, a gunnery sergeant. We didn't get along. And I said, well, I don't want to stay here. So I asked to go back over.
All right. Now, when you go over this time, where do you go?
Went to Okinawa, a place called Camp Sukaran, Okinawa. And I was stationed there for 14 months.
Okay. And what duties did you have there?
There, I was admin chief of a battalion. And while I was there, I didn't like the outfit I was with, really. I went to the weapons company. And I think that's when I first really realized of the segregation coming from the officers. Because I was weapons company admin chief. And my first sergeant, the Marine Corps had a way of grading from 0 to 4 for people who were NCOs. and 4 being top, 0 being the bottom. Well, there was 3 sergeants in my group that was under the first sergeant. And our company got the highest rating for admin. And my first sergeant was proud of us. He was proud of us. Anyway, when I took my record book in for the captain to give me my grade, because the captain had to put the grade in there, the other 2 sergeants got 4.0s and I got a 3. So when my book came out, my first sergeant looked at it and he said, he took it right back in there. And there was a big argument. I could hear him. And when it came back, it had a 4.0. So he told me what happened. First sergeant did. Well, I knew we were good. Our company was good because earlier the battalion commander wanted me to come over and be the admin chief of the battalion. And I told him he had a staff sergeant there, and I'm a sergeant. I said, you got a staff sergeant that's the admin chief. And he said, well, I want you to come over. I said, well, I can't take his job, you know. And what I really was telling him, hey, promote me to staff sergeant and I'll come over there. But I didn't want to go over there that way, so I told him I didn't want to come over there that way. And so he said, okay, he understood, and he let me go. But our company commander he was bad. He was bad. He marked all the black Marines low.
Now, was he a Southerner or just?
Yep, he was from the South.
Now, as far as you could tell at that point, being in the Marine Corps in the 50s over the course of a number of years, did you have a sense of sort of what proportion of officers and so forth had that kind of attitude? Was that sort of distinctive because it was unusual for you, or was that pretty much the norm? Or?
Well, at that time, we had only 1 black officer in the Marine Corps, and that was Colonel Peterson. Well, at that time, he was a lieutenant, I think. And at El Toro, while I was there, he was refused to go in the officers club. And he had to come back and get what we call the officer today, who was in charge of the base, to get him into the officers club because they wouldn't let him in there. And he did get in. But the officers in the Marine Corps when I was in the 50s were all, majority of them were Southern officers. And no, there was a resentment there.
Now, was there pressure on them from above to kind of adjust and get used to it, or?
Well, the senior Marines were NCOs, and a lot of them were from Moffett Point, and they knew about the segregation. But the Marines from the North, we weren't really accustomed to that. So we had to kind of get used to it. And they would tell us about the officers and who was what, stay away from him, and so forth. The senior NCOs that were from Moffett Point. And it was hard for us to pick up on that.
Okay. Now, does the climate change as you kind of go into and through the 60s? I mean, is there a point when more and more of the Marine officers and so forth are simply accepting of black soldiers and just treating them based on how they perform?
Yeah, during the 60s, yes. It did change, and it got a little better, easier. You didn't have to, I guess you could say, prove yourself. But I had a Marine captain tell me that he'd never promote a black person because he said they have to prove themselves to me. And he was a Polish man and his dad was from Poland. So I told him, I says, where are you from? He told me he was from somewhere back in New York. And I said, where was your dad born? He said, Poland. I said, well, my dad was born in Michigan. I said, where was your grandfather born? He said, my family's from Poland. I said, well, my grandfather was born in Michigan. I said, I'm an American, you know. So I was really resentful, and he really got angry with me and shut me up real quick.
All right. So how long then, as you said, about 14 months in Okinawa, was that it, or something?
14 months on Okinawa, and I came back in 57.
Okay.
And then in 1958, I went to I went to school over at Parris Island, South Carolina. And an incident happened there where me and a white sergeant, we were both staff sergeants, we got on a plane at California, flew to Atlanta, Georgia, walked into the waiting room, and I paid no attention. I walked in the waiting room with him. We both sat down waiting for our plane to go to South Carolina. A man walks up to me and he says, "Where are you from?" And I looked at him. I said, "Well, I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan." He just looked at me and he walked away. So my friend said, "Look at that sign." And I looked up at the sign and it said, "White waiting room." And I said, "Well, guess we better get out of here." So we both got up and walked out. But we just waited outside till the plane got there and went on.
All right. So what was the school or training in South Carolina?
It was the Advanced Admin Training School. And I think there was about 40 of us in the class. And as we graduated from that, we went our separate ways and everything. Although we did have a couple incidents where we got followed back from Savannah, Georgia one night. And a couple cars followed us all the way back to the gate. And the MP stopped them at the gate and things like that.
So did you go off the base much?
Yeah, I did, and I only went off, I think, maybe twice to Savannah. And there was one of our sergeants, he was a staff sergeant like me, and he said, "I am never going off this base again." After that night, we got followed back. And the only time he went off was when we flew out of South Carolina. So, but my friend and I, we went back to Southern California. He was from Northern California, but we went back to Southern California.
Yeah, it must be kind of a strange experience to kind of go in and out of sort of a segregated society and have some people treating you one way and others a different one. Did you just recognize, okay, well, that's just how it is right now?
Yeah, we did. And then, you know, when this happened to us, we just absorbed it and just said, well, this is the way things are, and it's going to be that way. But I went from there to, after school, I went back to El Toro base. And that was my mistake of re-enlisting for the first time for 6 years because they wanted drill instructors, and I did not want to be a drill instructor. But I re-enlisted for 6 years, so I had a 6-year obligation. And they said, "You're going to drill instructor school." I said, "I really don't want to go." But I went. And I finished the drill instructor school, and my first platoon I had down there was an honor platoon, and I had a run-in with a little general called General Krulak. He was 5'2", the littlest general in the Marine Corps. And when we were on the drill field, I was on the drill field one day with my platoon, and I was the only one out there, and I tried to stay away from General Krulak. And San Diego has got a real long strip, and his office was at the end. And we had a colonel of our outfit who was 6'4", and when you look down there, you could see Krulak and the colonel, because one was 6'4" and the other was 5'2". So I seen them walking towards me, so I turned my platoon and went the other way, and they turned. I said, "Oh shoot!" So I turned them again, and they turned, came back. So finally, here come Colonel. He was running and catching me and calling me, "Sergeant, Sergeant, stop that platoon!" So I stopped him, and General Krulak walked up to me and asked me to put the platoon through certain drills, and I did. And then he says, "How do you like being a drill instructor?" Well, my mouth got going too fast, because I told him, I said, "I don't like it." Oh boy, I said the wrong word. He got right up in my face, and he said, you know, his stars looked like they were that big, and he had 2 stars. And he said, "Do you want to be relieved, Sergeant?" I said, "General, do you mean right now?" He said, "Right now." I said, "No, sir." I said, "I'll do my job." I said, "No, sir." So he said, "All right." And I took my platoon and got out of there. Anyway, when my platoon graduated, we have what they call the drill instructor's mess hall. And I was sitting in the mess hall for breakfast. And he knew when he came in the door, General Krillak came in the door, I seen him and I put my head down, hoping he wouldn't see me, but he did. He walked over to me and he said, he knew my platoon had graduated honor platoon.
Mm-hmm.
He said, how do you like being a drill instructor now, Sergeant Redwine? I said, oh, he knows my name. I said, he didn't know my name the first time.
Mm-hmm.
He knows it now. So I said, General, I don't like it. I said, but I'll do my job. So he pushed his chair back and he said, well, that's all I could ask.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, that was it.
Mm-hmm. So how long did you last as a drill instructor?
3 years. I was there
Okay.
during 60, 61, and 62. I was there, 60, 61, 62.
Now, did you, as a drill instructor, did you have any idea of how you wanted to go about it in terms of how you were going to treat your men or things like that? Or did you have good or bad examples in mind from your own experience?
No, we had, no, I did not. We had a plan of the day, and we went strictly by that plan.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you had to get up at a certain hour. You had to go to basic rifle marksmanship at a certain hour. You had to go to classes at a certain hour, and there's so many platoons that you had to be on that schedule, and you had to be there at that certain time, leave at that certain time, and so forth. And it was really it dictated along the day what you would do. And at one time I had 2 platoons, because that was when the Vietnam War started, and we had 2 platoons and 3 guys, 3 drill instructors, and we would go home, change clothes, and come right back to the other platoon. We took one platoon through it, go home, change clothes, come back, because you had to have 2 drill instructors with the platoon all day long. So it means one person got to go home. So when your uniform felt like getting dirty or something, you say, I got to go and change clothes. That guy went, the other guy stayed. So it was really rough there during the last part of my time.
Now, during what years were you a drill instructor?
60, 61, and 62. 1960, 61, 62.
Okay. I guess at that stage we didn't really have any significant number of combat troops in Vietnam.
No.
But I guess the Cold War was getting interesting in a lot of ways, so maybe they were building up the Marine Corps at that time.
I think we had troops there, but I don't think they were recorded there.
All right. But in any case, it created business for you, whatever was going on.
We had a thing called CAC, and I don't know what the acronym really means, but it's a outfit over in Vietnam before they built up real bad. And that's when the Marine Corps started drafting us, when we got our 2 platoons, because they weren't drafting before that.
All right. Now, how do you manage to get out of being a drill instructor?
Finish your tour.
Okay.
And then I went to Bellingham, Washington, the I&I staff up there, and served up there for 3 years.
So what is I&I staff?
It's called Inspector Instructor Staff, and you work with the reserve units of the Marine Corps. And I went up there and run into a bunch of my recruits that I had in boot camp. So they all knew me up there. So. And that's really another story of when I ran into segregation. Bellingham, Washington had 1 black person in it, and it was a woman married to a white man. And I went up there ahead of my family, because I'd married while I was down in San Diego. And I asked her about it, and she said, they don't like us here in town. So I said, I don't understand that, because I rented a place here, and it's right there. And the man didn't say anything about it. He just rented me a house. So anyway, she said, well, they don't like us here. I said, well, okay. I went back to my office and talked to my captain, and he said he was from Oklahoma. And he told me, he said, I didn't know you were coming here. And I says, I don't understand. I says, I know you got advance word that I was coming here. You know, he says, and what he was telling me is they didn't know a black man was coming. So he said, well, they don't like you here. He said, let's go downtown and see what kind of reception we get. Well, he wasn't aware that I had been up there a week ahead of time and went to an office up there, went right downtown to the hotel, sat right there, got my room and everything, and left. And then I came back and reported in. he wasn't aware of that. So when we went down there, people were saying hi, and I was saying hi to him. Like, and he said, well, they know you. I said, I've been here. I've been here before. So he said, well, I guess it's okay. I said, well, I don't understand what you're talking about, but okay. So we went back to the office, and I stayed there for latter part of 63 through the latter part of the early part of 66.
So what was life up there like?
It was nice. My wife was a registered nurse, my first wife. She was a registered nurse. And when we got there, she went to the Bellingham hospital and told them she was a registered nurse. And they said, can you come to work tomorrow? So she went right to work. First, we were there, and they loved her up there. Bellingham was I had no problems in that city.
Now, what did your kind of daily duties consist of up there?
Well, mainly we were at an office which was right on the bay, and it was an administrative office, and we had the reserves in there every week, and then some were there every week, and then some were there for a whole weekend, and we took them to training, and we went up to training with the Seaforth Highlanders of Canada. We had a training outfit up there with them, session, and we took the troops to Camp Pendleton twice for training. Flew them down and flew them. So basically, our job was just to train them when they came in on the weekends. They called them weekend warriors. That's what they did. They came in on a weekend. We had training for them.
All right. Now, over the course of the time you're there, they now are starting to send Marines in significant numbers over to Vietnam.
Yes.
Now, were you following that or paying attention to that news, or just minding your own business?
I wasn't until they found out that they were sending Marines over there in groups, real big groups. And then they said they were forming the 5th Marine Division. And I said, well, boy, this is getting big. So we got orders to disband. And we disbanded the 56th Rifle Company. That's what it was called. And then us who were on active duty went to Camp Pendleton for the 5th Marine Division.
Yeah, because by and large, reservists were not being called up to go to Vietnam. So the guys you were training weren't going to go, but the active duty personnel are all available.
Right.
All right.
Now the reservists could go if they wanted to go, but they didn't. Most of them didn't go. But we had no choice. The active duty people had no choice.
All right.
Now, I was a staff sergeant when I got there, and when I got down to Camp Pendleton, I was a gunnery sergeant. So, and I was a senior enlisted black person in the outfit.
And then what specific unit were you then assigned to? So
I was assigned to the 3rd Battalion, 26 Marines.
Okay.
5th Marine Division.
And then how long was it before you go over to Vietnam?
Well, when we left Washington State, I brought my family back here to stay, and I had a wife and 2 children at the time. And then we went to Camp Pendleton. I went to Camp Pendleton and took over the 3rd Battalion, 26 Marines.
And then how long did you stay there before you go to Vietnam?
I think we were there from July through August. We went over Vietnam. We went aboard ship, I think, in September.
Okay.
That was the time of 66.
Okay. Now, what was that voyage like?
That voyage was a lot different. I was a gunnery sergeant then, so I was a little senior. So the Navy has a rank of E7 and above, and they call them chiefs.
Yeah.
So the E7, at that time it was E7 only. So I was a gunnery sergeant. So I was up there, so I could go into the chief's quarters. And they put us aboard a APA, a ship to take us across, and we went through a typhoon again. And at this time we went through the typhoon, it was a little different because while I was on ship, my boss was a major and I was a senior enlisted man. So he called me on the APA and I had to report to him of the troops, the condition of the troops. And he told me, he says, give me a report every day. I said, yes, sir, you know. So the Navy was getting me across this water. I said, don't we have a PA system here? And he said, yeah. I said, well, let's use the PA system. I don't like going across that deck. You know, with all that water, the water is up here and then down here and then up here. And we had a carrier with us, and sometimes you could look down and see the carrier, and sometimes you look up here and the carrier's up here. You know, the swells were so large. And everybody was sick. And one day he called over and he said, I want to know the condition of the tanks. Well, I said, okay. So I called the gunnery sergeant who was in charge of the tanks, and I told him to go down and inspect the tanks. I said, I'm not going down that hole. So I told him, because I was senior, I said, you go down there. So he went down there and he inspected the tanks, and when he came up, he was upchucking and everything, you know, because of the gasoline, the fumes down there and everything. Well, one of our tanks with a blade on it had come loose, and it punctured the side of the ship a little bit. Anyway, we were outside of Okinawa, and our ship split 2 inches at the seam. So the captain came on and he said, all hands don your life jackets. Now usually they put you through a drill. They say all hands don your life jackets, and then they say this is a drill. So when he said all hands don your life jackets, everybody's waiting for this is a drill, and it never came. So everybody got scared. Whoa, what's happening? So he said we have a split in the seam of 2 inches, but I think we can make it to Okinawa. So we said, we hope we can make it to Okinawa. So anyway, he said, we're only going to be making, I think it was 7 knots. And he said, there's another typhoon coming behind us. And the Marines on there said, we can swim faster than this boat's moving. Let's go in the water. So we said, no. We said, we think we'll make it. We said, boy, we really hope we do. Well, we did. And they had to tow that ship back to the United States after we got off. We got off in Okinawa and went aboard a carrier called the Wasp. And the Wasp took us to Vietnam.
Okay. Now, where did you land in Vietnam?
We landed at a place called, we ended up at a place called Dong Ha. But we got aboard, off the ship in the ocean into small boats. Okay. And then went up the river to Dong Ha. And I was at Dong Ha from when I got there till about 6 months. I was there 6 months, I think.
All right.
And then I left and went to Phu Bai, which is a base in the same province, but just a little bit south.
Right. Now, at Dong Ha, what was the situation there when you got there, as far as you could tell? What was your unit doing?
When we first got there, we were fine. We were fine. I think we were surprised to the Vietnamese. Anyway, we did not receive a whole lot of fire. We did receive fire, and maybe about a week after we got there, we went into a place called Kobe and Tan Tan. That's the name of the 2 villages. And we were in between them. And we got shot at from there. And our colonel called in the village chief and told him that, you know, we're here to protect you, and if we get fired on again, we're going to have to fire on your base, on your village. So one night when we noticed, our intelligence noticed that the people were leaving the village, so we were prepared to fire. So as soon as one round came out of there, we had a battery called Charlie Battery there, big guns. And as soon as that shell came out, Charlie Battery just fired in there because they were all ready for them. We knew we were going to get hit.
So were you the first American troops into Dong Ha then?
I think we were the first Marines. I don't know if the Army was in there or not.
Now, were there other American or South Vietnamese troops in the area? Were there other bases around?
Yes, there was South Korean, South Vietnamese south of us because they used to shoot overhead. And we had to finally ask them, I didn't ask them, of course, but the colonel asked them not to fire over the top of us because they had some what they call short rounds. They didn't make it all the way. So they were firing into the north because Dong Ha sits right here, and here's the water, and there's North Vietnam.
Yep.
So they were shooting over the top of us into North Vietnam. So they had to stop them from shooting over there because short rounds were landing
Right.
on us.
Okay. Now, from Dong Ha, were you patrolling out into the countryside and up toward the DMZ, or what were you doing?
We patrolled the whole area there in Dong Ha, right along the river. And I don't know where we were actually all the time. I can tell you we were out there, and a couple times we were very, very close to NVA.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of not NVA, but
Viet Cong? Or?
Viet Cong running around our place. And they were running around all over.
What were they doing?
Sabotage.
Okay.
Most of it is sabotage. They would, all the trucks would be flat. Some of the engines be destroyed. We never got a direct fire from them. I just remember one incident where there was a man standing in our base, and all the Vietnamese stayed away from him, and he moved. And then the Vietnamese would move away from him. And so finally the MPs went over and got him.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a grenade on him. And that's close. And then I had a Vietnamese approach me through it, and he started walking towards me, and I'm sitting in my Jeep, and he walked towards me, and I told him to stop, and he says, "I'm one of you." I said, "No, you're not, stop," because he was not a Marine.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Stop." So he wouldn't stop, he kept coming. So I had to pull out my pistol and point it at him. And I didn't shoot him, I just pointed at him.
Mm-hmm.
And he stopped. He says, "I'm one of you." I said, "You're not." I said, "Stay where you are." So my driver was getting anxious. He says, "I think you ought to take him out." I said, "Let's just move." So we moved on.
Okay. Now, at this time, I mean, what kind of orders did you have, or to what extent were you being told what you were doing there?
Not a lot. We didn't receive a lot of information. The only reason I had some information is because I was, like I said, I was admin. I worked in the G3s and the G2s and the G1s, and I just know that one night I was sitting there in a G3, and our major called and said, "We have to shoot because we have." It was during the Tet Offense. We have NVAs coming at us, and we got a report. There's 200 of them, just 100 yards away or something, and we have to shoot. And I know they came back, and you can't shoot because it was during their celebration. And he told them, he said, if we don't shoot, we're going to be overrun. So that was the scariest time I was there, because my lieutenant got hit, and I was on the ground. And
so you did come under fire at that point?
Yeah. They were shooting at us.
Okay, and when was this? Small arms fire or mortars?
Small arms.
Okay.
And mortars. We call mortars small arms.
So this probably would have been like a Tet 67. So not the big Tet offensive is 68.
Yeah, we were. This was 66.
But in 66, well,
this was not a Tet offense. This was just NVAs coming over.
Coming in and attacking while you were there. So basically, what happened that night, or what do you remember about that?
The only thing I remember that night is that we fired back. Charlie Battery opened up and fired back. But I know they went out and did what they call the body count, and I did not go out. I had a couple guys got hit, my people. I did not go out. I went to the hospital. Like I say, my lieutenant got hit. My clerk got killed, and
is that the first time you'd really seen combat casualties or anybody that you knew get hit?
Yeah, really, really bad. Because my staff sergeant got shot up, and he had to go to Okinawa. They flew him out. He was so bad. But other than that, I didn't get hit. I didn't get a scratch.
Now,
So.
at this point, what kind of defenses did the base have? I mean, to what extent were you dug in or fortified while you were there?
We were all dug in, and we all had foxholes right next to us, and we just stayed in there. Everybody was just dug in. When you walked around, you seen people just laying in foxholes and things, and trying to stay alive. Because Dong Ha really got hit bad.
Yeah. Well, a little bit later on, there was a fairly substantial battle that went on in that area.
Oh, yeah. I was down at Fubai at that time, and I didn't. I know a lieutenant I was stationed with at San Diego. He called down, and I didn't realize who he was until he said, "Is this Sergeant Redwine?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "This is Lieutenant Boyd. I'm now Major Boyd." I said, "Oh, okay." And so I knew who he was. And
all right. So you're there for the Dong Ha area for about 6 months. It's sort of, you have one reasonably serious attack during that time.
no, there's more than one.
And there's more. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
there's more than one.
so that, would it just periodically they would just come in close and start shooting at you, or?
You'd hear them all day long, just shots fired, and just like sniper fire, you'd hear it all day long, and you hear somebody shoot back, things like that. But another incident I had there is that at the time, this was in February, I had my wife had twins, and the Red Cross sent me a message out in the field saying my wife had twins. No, they didn't say my wife had twins. They said my wife had delivered. And so I went to the Red Cross and I said, "What have I got? What do I have?" Because they didn't say what it was. I already had 2 boys. So I said, "What do I have?" So they said, "It doesn't say." I said, "Well, can you wire back and ask?" So they did, and it came back: wife fine, children fine. And I said, "Well, what do I have?" They said, "We don't know." So I said, "Well, how can I find out?" They said, "I had to go to Da Nang." So I asked my boss, I said, "Can I go down to Da Nang?" He said, "Yeah, if you can catch a plane." I said, "Okay." So I went over and caught a plane and flew to Da Nang, and went into the Red Cross and asked them to wire back and see what I had. So they came back the same way: wife fine, children fine. I said, "Look," I said, "I got 2 kids." I said, "Ask them what gender my wife, what it is that my wife had." So then it came back, boy and a girl. I said, "Well, thank you very much. I got twins," because my wife didn't know she was going to have twins, and we didn't get mail up there too often.
Yep.
So I had twins. So I flew back to Dong Ha, and on my way into Dong Ha, we were getting sniper fire from the ground. So the pilot told me he wasn't sure he could touch down. I said, "Well, hey, I got to get there." So anyway, we went back to Da Nang. Then I got an Army plane, and the guy was coming up to Dong Ha. I don't know what kind of Army plane it was, but it was a twin-engine plane. And he said, "I'm going to Dong Ha." I said, "Well, can you drop me off?" He said, "Yeah." So I got on this plane and went to Dong Ha. Well, he came in on the runway, and he hit the runway, and he turned around. He said, "Get out." And the plane was still moving. I said, "You're moving." He said, "Get out." So I jumped out, and zoom, he was gone. And I hit the ground rolling, and geez. And right after that, mortars came in, So he got out there just in time. So he wasn't staying around.
All right. So you're there at Dong Ha. Now, does your unit move, or do you just get moved down to Fubai?
I'm the only one that left and went to Fubai.
Okay. And what assignment did you have in Fubai?
Fubai, I was division adjutant, not division. I was division admin chief, and I stayed there until I came back in November of 1967.
Okay. And then what did your duties consist of as division admin chief?
Moving people. Moving people from, according to their MOS, as to where they should go. If a person came in and he had an infantry MOS, we had to find out which company needed him. If he came in and had a cook's MOS, we had to find out who needed him, and then we moved him in there. Excuse me. We moved him into there.
All right. And so what was life like there on that base? I mean, day to day, what were you doing?
Fubai was like a R&R camp. If you come out of Dong Ha, it was, boy, this is nice. We can walk around in the daytime without our
Flak jackets.
flak jackets on. So it was nice. And I just remember I had to go back to Dong Ha one time, and this major asked me to go with him, and because I was from Dong Ha, and he wanted me to go with him. He wasn't there, so I went with him. I said, I really don't want to go up there, Major. He said, well, I can order you. I said, okay. So I went with him, and put a flak jacket on, went up there and rode in the back of the Jeep with a shotgun, you know. And then came back. We were scared all the way up, scared all the way back. So, but we never got any hits or anything like that. But Fubai was nice. We had a Marine go crazy over there and shoot up the general's little house he had. And the commanding general got killed. Not by him, but the commanding general got killed. I don't remember his name, in a helicopter crash. And I stayed there at Fubai until October, somewhere around there. And they said, well, you're going home in November, because we had the rotations.
Right.
It's my time to go. So I went to Da Nang and flew out of Da Nang.
Okay. Now, while you were in Vietnam, I guess, first of all, how would you characterize the morale of the units you were serving with? Who's the soldiers at Dong Ha or in the headquarters when you're working there?
Well, the older Marines was okay with them. I found out that the younger Marines were real nervous, real scared, and really didn't know what they were doing. And you had to direct them all the time. The senior NCOs were more calm and could handle the troops. Although we did have a few senior NCOs that were scared to death. And I remember one sergeant, master sergeant, he was just scared to death to be there. And he ended up, they just moved him out. He was just, he couldn't handle it. He was a he was a Korean vet that they called back.
Okay.
So he was scared, and they just moved him out and sent him back home.
So it didn't necessarily matter that they might have had combat experience before in terms of who wound up being effective this time or not?
No, it did not, because those that had combat experience before were just as scared as the others. But I think the scariest part is they didn't know who they were fighting. Because we were fighting sometimes a person that was out in the rice paddy during the daytime, out there pulling rice right next to the camp. And at night he got a gun, fighting.
All right. Yeah. What impression did you have of the Vietnamese themselves, to the extent that you had contact with them there?
Well, I know you're putting this on film, but I'll just have to tell you that I was really didn't want anything to do with them. I didn't associate with any of them. All the time I was in Vietnam, I ate food out of the mess hall or out of my canteen, out of my kit. I drank water out of a water buffalo, which was warm water. It wasn't cold, but we had experiences where the Vietnamese were taking glass, grinding it up and putting it in water, and Marines were drinking that. And I didn't want that. So when I went to the water buffalo, I got my own water and everything like that. And so I didn't associate with them at all.
Now, did you have Vietnamese working on the bases, either headquarters?
They were working on the bases, but none by me.
Okay. All right. Now, while you were in the States and in Okinawa at different times, you had noticed, some issues regarding racial tension and the like. Was there much of that in the ranks or so forth, or did Dong Ha, did that not matter so much?
It didn't matter in Dong Ha, and it really didn't matter in Fubai either. It was, we didn't have the racial problems we had that we had back here in the States. We didn't have, they didn't exist over there.
Yeah, and did drug use becoming an issue yet, or was that early enough that you weren't really seeing it?
I never got involved with the issue with drugs. I had a platoon of men on a guard one night, and I caught one of the men smoking marijuana, and I just sent him home. I'm not home. I sent him back to his office and said, he's relieved. He's relieved. I don't want him. So send me somebody else. And that was the only one. I've never run into issue of drugs or anything over there.
Yeah. On the whole, how well would you say the units where you were with were performing or doing their jobs while you were with them?
Our unit did well. Our unit was very good, and it was very good to be associated with the 3rd Battalion, 26th Marines. They were very good. I didn't hear of any Marines that were doing bad. All of them were doing good. While I was there, when my lieutenant got hit, I had to sort of act as the adjutant, and I had to go over and look at the bodies. And I think the worst one I've seen was a guy who didn't have a head. And we had the worst one I seen, and then we had a warrant officer who had to take what he had to what they called graves registration. All he had was a head. He didn't have no part of the body, just a head. So I did see bad things happening to our people.
But on the whole, they were doing their jobs pretty well.
Oh, they all did their job well.
All right.
I didn't see there was no cowardness, nothing like that.
All right. So now, did you do the thing where you were kind of counting down the days until you got to go home?
Yeah, I did. I had a deck of cards like everybody else, and 52 days. When I got to 52 days, we took our deck of cards and started throwing them away, and we counted right down to the day we had to leave.
All right. Now, so you finish. So it's getting kind of late '67. You finish your tour in Vietnam. Now, do you get to go home for a while, or what do you do next?
I did. In '67, I came home, and I'll tell you, when we were at Da Nang, we were going to get hit that night. And word was out we were going to get hit. So the airplane was sitting on the tarmac, and I'm in the where you call it, where people wait. And I didn't get on the plane right away. So the crew chief came over to me. He says, "Gunny, are you going to go with us?" I said, "Yes, I am." "Are you ready to go?" He said, "Yes." I ran over to the plane. We took off. When that plane got about elevation of maybe about 5,000 feet or so, you could just hear a sigh of relief come on the plane, and guys started crying and everything, and it was just, whew, we're out of here. Because we didn't know whether we were going to get hit or not, because that night we were supposed to get hit. And everybody was scared. But then I came back to the States, and I was at San Diego, and they were going to put me back on the drill field, but I was selected for first sergeant. So, and I came back and I had a medical problem. I had hypertension. So they told me I can't go back on the field. So I stayed around San Diego for a while, then they sent me to Camp Pendleton.
Okay. I'm going to take a pause right here.
Okay.
Just switch off the microphone. All right. So we had basically gotten you back to the States again
Right.
and assigned back at Camp Pendleton, was that where
Camp
you were?
Pendleton.
Okay. Now, did you stay there for an extended period of time, or?
Well, I was at Camp Pendleton, and I was a gunnery sergeant with the base motors.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, they applied for, and they commissioned me second lieutenant.
Okay.
So I went from being a first sergeant to a second lieutenant.
All right. Now, did you then have to go to an officer training school, or what
No.
happened? They just.
I went to the brig, which is the jail.
Mm-hmm.
I was first sergeant of a motor transport company, and when they made me a lieutenant, I went to the brig, and I served there, I think, for a year.
All right. Now, did you just decide on your own to apply to get promoted, or did people encourage you to do that, or how did that work?
Yeah, they did. I had a friend of mine who was, we were both E8s
Mhm.
first, and three of us really, and we said, wait, they have a program here, let's apply for it and see if we can get it.
Okay.
And we're all black,
Mhm.
so we all applied for it and we all got it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just something we just did on a whim, see if we could do it.
Okay. Now, does doing that obligate you for a longer time to stay in the service, or you were going to stay in anyway, so it didn't matter? Or?
No, at that time I had 17 years in,
Okay.
and I had planned to get out at 20 anyway.
Mhm.
And in order to retire as an officer, you have to serve 10 years as an officer.
Mm-hmm.
But the reserve time counts. So once
Okay.
I transferred to the reserves, at the end of the 10 years,
Mhm.
they promote you to your highest rank.
Okay.
So I was second lieutenant in the brig, and then I got orders to go to Okinawa again.
All right. Well, talk a little bit about the duty with the brig. Were you in charge of it, or?
No, I was not. We had a
Okay.
major in charge.
All right.
And I was the admin officer of the brig. But I had a compound. They had 5 compounds there, and we had 5 officers, and each officer had a compound. So we were in charge of the compounds.
Okay. So how busy was the brig at Camp Pendleton while you were there?
Oh, it was terrible. It was very, very busy. We had over 1,000 Marines in brig. And we had anywhere from guy going AWOL, unauthorized absence,
Mhm.
to murderers. And they put me in charge of what they call the maximum security unit,
Okay.
because I didn't have to, so I wouldn't have to go out and check them all the time. I knew where they were, and they couldn't they couldn't go out of the compound. And I was in charge of that unit. And I had about 150 men, and then I had about 6 guards.
Okay. Now, was this a different situation from what it had been a few years earlier? Were there a lot more men now in the brig, do you think, or do you not know?
I don't know, but I think at that time there was a whole lot of men in the brig that shouldn't have been in the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how they got in the Marine Corps. So
Well, a lot of them got drafted, most likely, and there was also the Project 100,000 that had gone on trying to take in people who didn't qualify for the
Right.
military being brought in as well.
right, and you know at that time back there, they had a lot of those guys were given the choice to go to the service or go to jail, and some of them chose the service, and we shouldn't have took them, but they did.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an idea were they being held there until they would get on trial, or were some of them just there to serve out a number of days and then go back to their units? Or
Some were there for the like a weekend. Some of them there for a week. Some of them were there because they had general court martials, which is the highest you can get.
Yeah.
And they were there for years. But we transferred those people to Portsmouth.
Mm-hmm.
And every month we would transfer Marines to Portsmouth. As we'd fill up, we'd transfer them to Portsmouth. Those long-term people that had 30, 40 years jail time coming.
And I guess with maximum security, you get the hard cases.
I had the hard ones. I had the maximum security ones. The other guys got the guys that went over the hill for a certain period of time and everything. But I I had the hard ones, but I really didn't deal with them a lot. Right. I let the sergeants deal with them and everything, and I just was the officer in charge.
Now, did you have your family out there living with you in California at that point?
I did. They were living in San Diego. In fact, one time I was an officer of the day, which is the person in charge of the brig, and about 2 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, sergeant calls me up and says there's 2 prisoners missing. And I said, well, how long have they been gone? He says, I don't know. They've been gone since the last count, which was 2 hours earlier. So it was in the morning. I said, I got started to get up, and I said, well, I think them guys are gone, so I ain't gonna worry about them. So I laid back down, then I thought, man, let me go down and check. So I got up, got dressed, and got a sergeant with a shotgun. I says, come with me. And we went down to the compound. So we looked all around the compound. We couldn't find them. So I went back to do my report because I knew I was in trouble. So I went back to do my report. And on the way back, the sergeant told me, he said, Lieutenant, I hear somebody by the fence. So I said, okay. I said, you go one way, I go another. And we went around, and here's this guy laying in between fences. The prison was set up where, the brig was set up where it had 2, I think it was about 15 feet apart, the fences, 2 fences. So he got over the first fence, but he couldn't get over the second one because the tower would have seen him, the tower guard. So I walked over there, and we walked over, and I said, he was laying on the ground. I said, get up off the ground. So he got up. I said, you come back over the fence because you're going to back up to jail. And he said, are you going to maximum security? Am I going to maximum security, which was my unit? I said, yes, you are, because he wasn't in there for that. But yes, but you're going to maximum security now because you tried to escape. But I didn't explain all that to him. I just told him, yes, you are. So he said, I'm not going there. So I told the sergeant, I said, shoot him. So the sergeant cocked his shotgun. Guy came over the fence. So I said, now where's your buddy? So he said, I don't have a buddy. I said, where is your buddy that escaped with you? So he said, he's down by the other side. So I went down there, and I told him the same thing. He come over the fence. So I took him up and put him back in maximum security. Well, my duty ended at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I went home. I got home, and my wife had a message. The commanding general wants to see me. A chief of staff called, wants me to call him back. So I just got home. Camp Pendleton to San Diego, there's about 90 miles there. So I said, yes, sir. He said, you got to come back up here. The general wants to see you. I said, what for? He says, come back up here. Colonel, tell me to come back up. I'm a lieutenant. Yes, sir. I change uniforms, get straight, and go back up to base. And the general walks in, and he says, you did a good job. And I says, well, thank you, sir. And I thought, saying, is that all you wanted? I could have told you this over the phone, you know? You could have told me over the phone, thank you. You know? So anyway, I went back home. I drove 90 miles up, 90 miles up. I said, my God. Well, anyway, it so happened that another night, I was a brig officer in charge, and we had a riot in one of the compounds. There was about 200 prisoners in there. So we had a riot squad that we called up when we had a riot. So I called this lieutenant up, and I told him, you get your riot squad up here, we got a riot. So he brought his riot squad to the brig, and they surrounded the compound. So I told the lieutenant, I said, we got to go in there and get my men out there. I got 3 sergeants in there, and we got to get them out there. He said, I'm not going in there. Now, he's a first lieutenant, and I was a second lieutenant, so I'm junior. So I said, we got to go in there and get my men. He said, I'm not going in there. I says, well, I said, okay. I said, but you know, I'm gonna have to report this in my log. He said, I don't care, I'm not going in there. I said, okay. So I got 2 sergeants, and I said, I want a path right to the house. So they put their shotguns down, created me a nice path. I walked right straight through the prisoners, walked up to the door, knocked on the door, and told the guys, they said, who is it? I says, Lieutenant Redwine. They said, okay. So I said, come on out. So they came out. I walked them right back out. And I told the lieutenant, you can take your troops back. I got my men, take them back. So I put that in the report. Same thing happened in the following day. I go home, and the general wants to see me. I said, my God. So I go back up to base, and the chief of staff says, well, you just go on in and have a seat in his office. So I went in and had a seat in his office, and I'm sitting there. So he walks in, and I jump up. He says, sit down. So I sit back down. He come over to me, and he says, good job you did last night. This is the second time. It was over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, that lieutenant that you told to go in there, he said, he's no longer in the Marine Corps.
Oh.
I said, oh, yes, sir.
Well, he didn't do his job.
Yeah, he got him out there. That surprised me, because he was the first lieutenant, and I was the second. But he didn't do his job, so he got him out there. He said, he's no longer in the Marine Corps.
Okay, so you have this duty for basically about a year?
About a year I was there, and then I was transferred to Okinawa again. And then I went over to what they called the 3rd FSR, 3rd Forest Service Regiment. And I was the only black officer in the regiment, in the thing. And that's another time where we had problems. We had what they call meritorious promotion month. And I was to get the people together for the meritorious promotion. So the companies would send in their people they want to promote meritoriously. I'd never seen a black person. So this major who was the XO, him and I, we were pretty good, get along pretty good. So he walks in, I says, I don't have any black people here again. He says, you don't? I says, yeah. I says, now this is about 3 or 4 months this has went on. I said, evidently they don't get promoted. Long story short, after that we started having some. And then the commanding officer there accused me of being, wait a minute, General Jones put out an order that you could not do the black power sign, the raising the fist. I never did it. I never did it. But I walked into the mess hall, and there was a black officer sitting over there. He was a warrant officer, and he was sitting over there on the other side, and I knew him from the States. So I threw up my hand to him like that. I said, I'll be right there. It got back that I did the black power sign. So my colonel calls me and he says, I understand you did the black power sign in the mess hall. And I says, when? He says, I forget what morning it was. I said, no. I said, I didn't do a black power sign. I said, the warrant officer, I told him by his name, was sitting over there, and I just threw up my hand to him. I just recognized him. I said, hi. He said, well, this other warrant officer said you did the black power sign. I said, well, let him come up here and tell me that I did that. I said, who said that? He said, I'm not going to tell you. I said, well, you're not going to tell me who said it? Well, bring him up here and let him tell me in front of me that I did it. He said, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, anyway, the major, who was the XO, spoke up for me and told the colonel, he said, I will investigate this and see what happens. And let's see what happens. So he went and investigated. This is about a week later, colonel calls me and says, I apologize. He said, it was not the black power sign. I don't know why he said that. I said, I told you I didn't do it. So anyway, in the mess, in the officers' mess on Okinawa, a friend of mine, a lieutenant, we were sitting there at the mess, and his wife was there. His wife has come over from the States for Christmas, and nobody was dancing with her. She said, I want to dance. I said, well, I'll dance with you. So I got up and I danced with her. When I came back to the table, 2 officers were with me, said, come on, let's go. I said, go where? Let's get out of here. I said, okay. So we went out, and when they got outside, they said, you better go back to your barracks right away and stay there. He said, there's 2 officers in there talking about what they call frag, shooting. He said, there's 2 officers in there talking about killing you because you danced with that white woman. I said, what? And now this is in 1970.
Yeah.
I said, what? He says, yeah, they're talking about fragging you. I said, I'll be darned. So I went back to my quarters. Well, after that incident passed, I didn't worry about it. My colonel didn't say nothing to me or nothing. Nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a female lieutenant colonel who I knew from the States.
Mm-hmm.
We were sergeants together. And she called me up and she says, I want you to come to my party. So I said, what party? I said, why are you having a party? Is your birthday? She said, no. I said, did you make bird? She said, bird colonel, chicken colonel. So I said, okay. So I asked this warrant officer to go over with me because I didn't want to go. It was the 1st Marine Division, and I was not in division. I was the 3rd FSR. So we went over to the party, and when we walked in, she come up and she hugged me, you know, and everything. So I said, well, congratulations and all and everything. Well, she left. This general came up, and he said, who are you? And I said, I'm Lieutenant Redwine. He said, you're not one of my officers. I said, no, sir, I'm from 3rd FSR. He said, well, I'm General, should I say his name?
Up to you.
He said, I'm General Wilson.
Okay.
He later became commandant. He said, I'm General Wilson. I'm from Tougaloo, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, I'm Lieutenant Redwine. I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. After that, the guy that was with me, Fisher, he says, let's go. So we left. So I got back to my base. My colonel calls me in. He says, who's this colonel you're over there hugging? I said, hey. I said, she's a friend from way back. I said, I've known her when she was way back sergeant. Now she's colonel, so it's got to be a long time.
Yeah.
So anyway, a month later, I got orders to go back to the States. My tour was not up. I got there in I think June or July, and my tour was supposed to be 14 months. This was May. So they sent me back to the States in May.
And what assignment did you get then when you got back?
I went back to what they call a schools battalion and served at Camp Pendleton, and I was there. But that was strictly because I was black. They moved me out of there because the guy that relieved me wasn't even there yet. And they don't relieve you until the replacement comes in.
So that kind of stuff is just still going on and showing up in various places.
You know, it's amazing that it still shows up because my cousin from Grand Rapids here was a Marine Corps officer, and he was a 1st lieutenant, and he went in I think 85, and he told me that when he was stationed in Okinawa, and when he came back, he told me that his commanding officer called him and told him that he doesn't promote black people, and as long as he's in his outfit, he will never be promoted. He was a 1st lieutenant. He told him that, and he told him, he says, if you repeat this conversation, I will deny it. And he served his time and got out. So it's still there. I've talked to many Marines who said it's still there.
Now, so you get back, so it's 1970 when you get back then?
I got back in 70.
Or early 71 now? Yeah, okay.
71.
All right.
And I went to a place called Schools Battalion in Camp Pendleton. And then I was not demoted, but my rank went back to, I only served 2 years as an officer, and I went back to 1st sergeant. And then I retired in March.
Now, was this a point when they were starting to downsize the military and
it was
bumping officers back down to enlisted rank in some cases if they came out of the ranks?
The officer's rank that you had was temporary.
Okay.
So they went back to their enlisted ranks. A lot of them did. When I went back to my enlisted rank, they moved me from Camp Pendleton to El Toro base. And while I was there, they came out with a thing called Project Transition, where your last 30 days in the Marine Corps, they let you look for a job outside. I think it was 30 days. It was 30 days or 2 months. I forget what it was. Anyway, I applied for it, and they denied me. So I said I'll request mass with the next officer up, senior officer up. So my colonel told me, he says, well, you know, they're going to deny you. I said, well, I don't know why. I said, we got other people on Project Transition. Why can't I get it?
Mm-hmm.
So he said, they don't allow E8s and E9s to go on Project Transition. So I requested mass with my next, he went in there and I seen the colonel and he says, no, he says, you can't go. I says, well, I request mass with the general. So he said, okay. So I went to see the general, who was a 2-star general. He told me, he said, First Sergeant, I don't allow E8s and E9s to go on Project Transition. He says, and I said, General, I said, I got 5 E8s and E9s in my outfit working for Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
He says, no, you don't. I said, yes, sir, I do. So the sergeant major of the base was standing there, and he told him, he says, he told the sergeant major to investigate and see if I was telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
That really hurt me, because I'm first sergeant of outfit, and he asked, he's going to say I'm lying to him? Anyway, we went back to my outfit, and he called me back a week later, and he said, you do have them? I said, yes, sir. I said, there's other outfits around here that got them working there too. I said, there's a lot of E8s and E9s on Project Transition.
Mm-hmm.
He says, well, I'm not going to let you go. I said, well, then I request mass with the Commandant of the Marine Corps. He said, you going to do that? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, what would you think if I went to the Commandant and told him I wanted Project Transition? I said, General, I says, you got 2 stars. I said, I'm a staff sergeant. I'm a first sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
Get out of my office. So he ran me out of his office. So he called me back. The base sergeant major called me back. I had to go back in to see him again. He said, I'm going to let you go on Project Transition, but you got to use up all your leave and all your time.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like saying, well, why me?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't do this to the other people. Why me? So anyway, I didn't do it. I said, let it go. So the sergeant major told me, he said, First Sergeant, let me tell you what this general's doing for you. And I really got mad then, and I let him have it. I said, this general is doing nothing for me. Those aren't the words I use, but I said, this general is doing nothing for me. I said, it's an order from the Commandant of the Marine Corps that enlisted people can go on Project Transition. And I said, I don't need to talk to you no more neither. And I left his office. Now, he was senior to me. He was an E9, I'm an E8, but I wasn't worried about that. I'm through.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did get my Project Transition. I went to work for the phone company.
Mm-hmm. And out in California, or did you come back?
In California.
Okay.
And I worked for the phone company for 20 years afterwards.
All right. And then you also stayed in the reserve for 10 years?
I was in the reserve, but it was inactive reserves. I
Okay.
did not have to report or anything.
All right. But they ultimately, though, you retire out and you got the rank of first lieutenant at that point?
Yes, I retired in March of '82, and they promoted me to first lieutenant for my retirement.
All right. Now, you look back at that kind of career you had in the Marine Corps. How do you think that affected you, or what did you take out of the experience?
Well, you know what? I'm proud of what I did, and if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't do it. And I did not allow my son to go in the Marine Corps. He wanted to go in something, and I talked him out of it. And I talked him into going to the Air Force. He wanted to go in something. I told him, don't go into the Marine Corps, and I gave him reasons why he didn't need to go in the Marine Corps. And I'm glad I did. But like I said, I'm proud of my service, but if I had to do it all over again, I would not go in the Marine Corps. Just have that feeling.
All right. I think that kind of gets us about to the conclusion here. I'd like to thank you for coming in and telling your story and being as forthcoming as you were about it.
No problem.
Some of the stuff is stuff people may not want to hear, but it's important that people know. So thank you very much.
I never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.